Hello, Laziali over the world. Welcome to Lazio Lounge. Finally, first victory for Lazio in the new year. Finally, Lazio was able to get 3 points against Sassuolo, who normally it's a tough opponent. The last two matches against Sassuolo away, Lazio lost. So Felipe Anderson scoring, Luis Alberto and Milinkovic-Savic starting. Great improvement by both. So it looks like everything is positive, but there are some bad news. The first one, obviously, is Ciro Immobile injury. The second one is, unfortunately, Alistair McKenzie is with me today. So we have to cope with these problems, Alistair, right?
I was just waiting for the build up there. I was like, what's the punchline going to be this time? But I don't know. It's too predictable, Vittorio. It's too predictable. Come on.
I know. I didn't have time enough to work on these things, but Shall we start from Ciro Immobile before talking about the match? I mean, I don't remember. Since the beginning of this podcast, we said Lazio need a Vice Immobile. Yeah. So it's not a surprise for us. But with Ciro turning 32, he's already 32, right? Injuries are becoming a factor. This is the season where he already missed more matches than ever. And we don't know how long he will be out this time. So Felipe Anderson is not the solution to the problem.
Yeah, well, we're kind of going around in circles with this, aren't we? Because we've already had a big debate around this a few months ago when he got his first injury. We've already discussed everything around the lack of options in the squad, around the need to sign someone else, around the pros and cons of having Felipe Anderson there. And we're back again. The difference this time from last time is that this has happened during a transfer window. Now, my general belief is that if we're ever going to stand any chance of signing anyone in January, you need kind of desperate measures to occur. So do you think there's any chance that the fact this has happened now might increase the opportunities, increase the willingness of the club to invest this month in something that we already needed anyway, but that they may well have needed a bit of a push in order to go and invest?
Well, definitely. The positive of this is that the transfer market window is open. So or you do it now or you don't. The problem is Felipe Anderson's performance and Sarri's belief doesn't go our way, right? Because Sarri enjoyed Felipe Anderson as a number 9, but we saw it already. It worked against Atalanta. It worked against Sassuolo. It didn't work against Juventus and Salernitana. So you can understand where the solution can go and where it doesn't. So the biggest issue, Alistair, is there's no budget for this, right? I don't think Lazio has spare money to spend on a Vice Immobile or the future Ciro Immobile, because that's where we're heading, I think.
Yeah, and we just missed our chance to sign Cristiano Ronaldo as well. Free transfer. It would have been such a nice cheap deal. Get him in on the cheap. So, yeah, I mean, it's... well, I don't know. Tell me more about the injury, because I think a lot of the answer to this kind of depends on the scale of the injury, the scale of the timeout he's going to be at, the scale of the time he's going to be out. But then again, like you said right at the start, this does highlight that this isn't an issue connected to just one injury, is it? This is connected to the fact that there's too much dependence on Ciro being fit and on form all the time. And now that he's a bit older, it's not going to be as frequent that we can rely on him.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look very, very serious, but it's not the problem now. It's the seasons end in May. How many matches will Ciro be able to play from now to May? He can pick up another injury in mid-February, beginning of April. We don't know. So the fact that he already had 2 injuries so far, for me, is a big alarm bell ringing. So that's our issue. That's our problem. And again, I understand that Murici wasn't the answer, even if he's been linked with Manchester United, Real Madrid, and so on. But we need another solution. And even yesterday, Sarri spoke a little bit about that because he said, well, our plan B is Felipe Anderson playing central forward. But if Felipe Anderson moved to that position, then we need a winger because we don't have enough wingers there. So the question here is, I think, do you think Lazio will try to sign a Vision Mobile or a replacement to Felipe Anderson on the winger? Because that's what Sarri thought yesterday, which again doesn't suit with what we believe, right? We think we need a Vision Mobile, not a substitution for Felipe Anderson.
Well, as we know, if Tare doesn't need an invitation to sign a winger, he's going to want to sign a winger regardless of what the selection situation is, what we need where, who's injured. He doesn't care. He just wants a million wingers. That's his general transfer strategy, is sign them whenever possible. Don't forget this time last year we were in a similar position. We need a Vice Mobile. What do? We sign Cabral, 6 months on loan, doesn't do anything. A winger trying to be converted into a striker for a 6 month loan spell, and then he goes home again and we never see him again. So yeah, we're not expecting miracles. We're not expecting much. I agree. There's not like loads of money to go and splash out in the market, but there are creative ways of doing this, and there are clubs with less money than Lazio who still manage to get players in during January transfer windows, and that's generally the thing that's more frustrating with these kind of moments. But anyway, the performance itself, I think that's something that we can take encouragement from. I think there were positives and negatives around the game the other day, and we can talk about both. But if we're going to start on a positive, I think it's probably the way the team did respond to losing Immobile, because that at that part of the game so early on, still 0-0, the team wasn't playing well,
No.
and it could have gone quite badly from there. It could have been a big knock to their confidence to lose their striker, lose their captain at that stage of the game. But actually, second half they got a lot better, and I think the team was still functioning and still seemed to remember how to function without him, which was important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first half, I agree with what Dionisi, Sassuolo's manager, said. The first half, Sassuolo played much better, created a couple of chances, not huge chances, but Lazio at the first corner kick we scored, we found a penalty. In the second half, we played much better, I thought. Sassuolo had more ball possession, but we created so many chances. Felipe Anderson missed a huge opportunity. I still don't believe it. So Luis Alberto had a chance. Zaccagni had a chance. I mean, we created so much more in the second half. And to be honest, rewatching the match, Sassuolo in the second half didn't have a shot on target, if I'm recalling correctly. So that's encouraging because last year our defense was awful. This year it looks much better. Casale Romagnoli had a terrific match again. So this is encouraging. And Isai, let's not remember, we played without Lazzari, and Isai was playing. And as well, I didn't think he had a great match, but at least it wasn't terrible like in the past, like last year. So there are a lot of positive signs, I think, out of Sassuolo match. We have to mention that Sassuolo is a team that is struggling to score. I mean, they scored 11 goals less than last year. So that's a sign that we were playing against a team that needs a help to score, and luckily this time we didn't help them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the defense being better, and I think definitely that's true. Because Romagnoli looked good. They restricted Sassuolo to very little. Alvarez barely touched the ball, as far as I could tell, in that game. But then again, I mean, the general point you make about the defense improving this season, while that is true and certainly was true at the start of the season, we have to also, acknowledge that this is the same defense that conceded twice to Empoli, conceded twice to Lecce, conceded 3 times before the break to Juve. None of those teams are teams you would expect to be conceding that many goals to. and I'd include Juventus in that because nobody concedes 3 goals to Juventus this year. So yeah, it was a relief, I think, to a lot of people to see the Lazio defense look a bit more like the old Lazio defense from the start of the season, but with quite a big asterisk in my eye, which is that this is a poor Sassuolo side that's in really bad form.
Yeah.
They were missing their first choice striker in Pinamonti as well. While the Lazio fans are celebrating at one end during the game, there was protests going on at the other end about the Sassuolo team falling towards the relegation zone. So we do need to be aware of the fact that this isn't the same Sassuolo as the one that we've come up against in the past few years, and the result shouldn't be read in the same way necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely correct. But let's not forget that Pinamonti scored 3 goals. It's not that Cristiano Ronaldo was missing, right?
I know he's in my Fantacalcio team. He's killing me.
Yeah, I know. He's on my bench, luckily. But yeah, this is probably the worst Sassuolo we ever played. But let's not mention that even in dark crisis, when Sassuolo played against Lazio, they always step up to the challenge. So it's good that for once they didn't. And what can we say about Luis Alberto? So Maurizio Sarri in the press conference after the match said, "This is the best match he ever played since I came to Lazio." So, do you agree with this statement, or do you think it's too much?
Well, it feels like it's too much, but I haven't gone through every single game Alberto's played under Sarri. And yeah, I think it's immediately laughable for most of us because we remember Alberto under Inzaghi. But if we're talking about Alberto under Sarri, obviously that is a different thing. I would still not say it was his best game for Lazio. I just think it's the right time for him to say that, isn't it? Because there's been all the transfer rumors, so on. There's been a bit of a tense relationship between the two of them from the start, and I think what Sarri's been wanting from Alberto, which is, I guess, contributions in both phases of the game, he hasn't always been getting, but he did get that more um, against Sassuolo, both defense and attack. I think the way Alberto's been linking up with the attack the last couple of games has been really good to see. Far more effective than Milinkovic Savic, surprisingly, in those positions. Another quiet game from him. So that kind of particular concern is still there. But yeah, I think they're just trying to draw a line under this. You know, they don't want to spend the whole month talking about Alberto, and it's hard because the way it works in Italy with the broadcast setup is that every single game there's basically a microphone put in front of Iglitare's mouth, and if you're asking the sporting director questions every 3 or 4 days, you're always going to end up asking them questions about who's unhappy and who's leaving. So that's how these kind of controversies get created. So I think it's more just Sarri just having enough of that stuff and trying to move on from it more than anything else.
You think so?
Maybe, yeah.
I thought Luis Alberto was impressive in this winter friendly match. Then he got injured, and then he came back, and I thought his performance was good. I agree with you. Milinkovic Savic didn't shine, but definitely much better than the last performance from Sergei, which is a good sign again. Because let's be honest, both Luis Alberto and Milinkovic Savic, they're not going to live in January, right? There's a chance they could live this summer, but they will have to stay at least till the end of the season. So let's get the best out of them. Luis Alberto spoke after the match and said, "Well, my dream is to go back to Cadiz, it's my team, etc. But now I know it's impossible. I have 2 years left in the contract, and for the moment, till I'm in Rome, I will give my best to Lazio." So I think he understood that there is no chance that he can leave now. So it's encouraging to see how he defended, because that's the question mark. No one doubt about his quality when Lazio is attacking, but against Sassuolo, his performance, even defending, was encouraging. And with that Luis Alberto, seriously, Lazio can be a contender. Now, without Ciro Immobile, things can get difficult. But with that, with Luis Alberto, and if Milinkovic-Savic steps up a little bit, things can be interesting. Even because you mentioned Juventus. It's tough to think Lazio can finish in the top four, but you never know, right? If Juventus collapse and if Inter explode, anything can happen, right?
Well, I did make a face at you last week when you were talking about how well Juventus were doing. And the reason for that was because I've not been convinced at all by them, even when they've been winning all these games. I still think, yeah, it's a big ask. I still stand by what I said last week. I'm not going to kind of blow with the wind so much that I'm going to completely change my mind now that we've won a game. It's obviously very tight in there, but I still think that dropping that many points against those kind of opponents that we were talking about last week is going to make it too difficult, because it's going to basically mean Lazio are going to have to win the big games. Going to have to be beating Juve and Inter really when we come up against them, winning the derby. Atalanta right in there as well, and I think that's going to be tricky to put those kind of expectations on it. What did you think about this debate this week that around Sarri and Tare? And now I see a statements come out this
Yep.
this afternoon for Lotito as well. I say, well, do you want to explain what that's all about first, and then we can maybe talk about that?
Well, basically, Sarri started last week, and he said, "I think it's a miracle if Lazio finish in the top four." And he said basically the other teams are much better than us, has a bigger budget, and so for us it's really hard to finish in the top four. Before Sassuolo Lazio, as you mentioned, Tare spoke, and one of the questions was, well, Sarri said that it would be a miracle for Lazio to finish in the top four, and Tare said, no, I don't agree. I think that's our target, our goal. It's achievable for us. And Sarri answered back after Sassuolo Lazio said, well, I have my ideas, and my idea is that for Lazio it's difficult because, and he has a point here, in the last 13 years, Lazio went twice in the Champions League. So this tells everybody that for Lazio it's quite difficult to get there. And he still repeated that he believes there are 4 teams better than us. So, but if Lazio play like against Sassuolo, everything is possible. And obviously, this mounted newspaper talk about issue between Tare and Sarri going on since the past year. And so today in the afternoon, Lotito made a press statement saying that Lazio is a big family, and in a big family there are some discussion, but they all for positive side to improve, etc. So yeah, this is it. What's your take, Alistair?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a big I don't think it's a big controversy that we need to be too concerned about the inner workings of the club, and I don't think anything's really changed here in my mind. But I think it's more of an interesting debate around what Sarri's comments were about the top 4 and the expectations, and the saying stuff like, Lazio qualified for the Champions League once in the last 10 years, and yet it's being talked about as a disaster if we're in 5th. And you can see where he's coming from. It is a bit unreasonable to be overly critical of the current situation, given how close things are in the table. But then again, you can't really talk about the historic precedent, because the reason you've been brought in is to build on the foundations of a coach who has just taken us to the Champions League, and they're investing in you and your project in order to do that again. And that is the explicit objective. So you can't just go back 10 years and talk about what the situation was like then, because thankfully Lazio have grown a lot since then. So yeah, I think Sarri's kind of trying to defend himself and protect the work he's doing there. Whether he really believes that it's impossible for Lazio to reach the top 4 or not is another question. I doubt he does.
For me, the biggest thing out of this is what's going on with Tare? Because his contract is expiring in 6 months, and there has been no news about it. And both Sarri and Tare are talking like he's going to be the sport director even next year. So why nobody's making the announcement? Why no one is saying what's going on? Because big teams starts now to start working for the next summer, right? So you should have a sport director in place. And this is the question: is Sarri going to decide the new sport director? Is Tare the new sport director? What's going on? I mean, why Lazio, as usual, doesn't explain what's going on if there's a new contract and talking about the new contract of Tare, etc. Because this is the key for Lazio's future, right?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's at all affected? I mean, by last summer, it had reached a point where I think most of us were a bit sick of Tare because of how many bad transfer windows there had been, how much money had been wasted on your Maricis and Vavros and the rest of them. But he did do a much better job last summer in terms of the number of players he managed to bring in, the standard of players he managed to bring in. Now, we could have another debate about how effective they actually have been in practice, but I don't think we can really argue too much that it was an improvement on what's happened before. So,
But
do you think that's affected the thinking at all behind the scenes that it was a bit better?
But rumors are is that Sarri approved all the signing, which didn't happen in the past. So, and if you remember, we talked about saying that Tari could leave the club at the end of the summer because he was not happy about his new position. Nothing changed since then, but Tari is still here with us. So it would be good to know: did Tari accept the new position? Did Sarri and Tari had conversation and find a new way of continue this relationship and so on? Because I don't forget that when Lazio presented a new shirt, Tare and Lotito were discussing each other, shouting to each other, right, at Piazza del Popolo. So what happened after that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? There's also, do you remember that video of Lotito scream at Inzaghi down the phone a couple of years ago as well? I mean, I think these things. He's quite a volatile character by the sounds of things, and there will be these heated discussions. I don't think it always necessarily means the end of a relationship or something is coming, toppling down or coming to the end. But Tare's been part of the fabric the entire time, hasn't he? I mean, he's been there almost as long as Lotito's been there. He is a big part of this kind of this era with Lazio. So it would be a huge move, and quite a bold move, I think, for the club to move on from him.
Yeah, you think so?
Well, it'd be a huge move, no doubt. I mean, it's
But
just because of how long he's been there, the reputation he's formed while he's been there. And I do think there's an element here of grass is always greener. I don't think by any means Tari has got everything right or he's been the perfect sporting director, but he has made a hell of a lot of good decisions as well as the bad ones. And it's worth keeping that in mind. And when you're out shopping for sporting directors, um, who would realistically take the Lazio job, not sure how many obvious upgrades you would get either. So need to be a bit careful with these things and not too emotional.
yeah, but I think the relationship between sport director and the manager is fundamental, right? They have
That's
to sort it out.
yeah.
So I mean that's very important. So that's the biggest concern I have. I mean, if the two fight against each other, it's not positive for the club, for Lazio. So that's the biggest question mark.
It's probably Sarri saying, "I need you to sign me a left back," and Tare saying, "How about a winger?" And we can convert them to a left back. Have you heard
or,
of Johnny? This guy's quite good.
or maybe sign a left back and try it as a winger. I mean, that could be the solution.
The secret to success.
Yeah, there are rumors that Johnny is coming back. Are you happy? Is that the replacement Sarri needed?
Well, never mind Johnny. I think one of the big surprises of the weekend was seeing Mohamed Faris back in the match day squad for Lazio. I mean, what was that all about? That took me by surprise.
Well, with Lazzari injured, I think we didn't disqualified. We didn't have that many options, and rumors are that Fare has been called and could play Thursday a couple of minutes to prove that he's fit, and so that the buyers would be interesting to sign him because he was injured. He got injured again in December, and now Lazio need to prove that he's fit. Hey, he's on the bench. Go and sign him because he's ready. So that could be the reason why was there. And if Thursday there's the Coppa Italia match, and we're going to talk about it afterwards, Fares could play. Things go positive, goes well, and Salernitana was linked with him, and that could be a proof. Hey, he's fit. Go and sign him.
Well, I mean, that would be the unlikeliest of kind of comebacks for Fares to become a first-team player again. But we need a left back. If he somehow recovered fitness and turned into an amazing left back under Sarri, that would be great. But it's quite hard to imagine that happening anytime soon. Thursday. So, I mean, Bologna, Coppa Italia. Do you expect this? I mean, we're talking about Fares, but how experimental do you expect this to get?
Well, let's start with the goalkeeper. I mean, if Maximiliano doesn't start, then there's something going on there, right? I expect him to start. Again, don't think Chiro's going to start. The question is, will Cancellieri have a go? That could be another option. What's going on with Marcos Antonio? Because we didn't mention, but against Sassuolo, Vecino came in place of Cataldi instead of Marcos Antonio. So will Marcos Antonio start against Bologna and prove that he's ready? Don't expect huge changes, but maybe these three could start on Thursday. And let's not forget that Lazio is not playing this weekend. Lazio will play, I think, Tuesday against AC Milan. Yeah. So you have time to recover, and this is positive. But I think that Sarri will... I expect these three subs to start at least. Maximiliano, probably Cancellieri, and Marcos Antonio.
Patrick, maybe? Yeah. Came back.
Yeah, sure.
Also, I think Gila's still injured, I think, isn't he? So that you'd expect, if he's going to mix up the defence at all, it would be to put Patrick back in there. I think I think the Coppa Italia is a funny, and this round of the Coppa Italia in particular is a funny one because you never know quite how to play it. It's been interesting watching some of the games last week where most of the big Serie A teams involved did play pretty strong teams, and it's a lot of the time obviously being Serie A clashes, and that's what we've got is a game against Bologna. It's not like we're playing a Serie B team. It's a decent Bologna side, a mid-table Serie A side. So it's not a case where you can just rotate everything and expect to go through. I think the debate again is going to be around the actual competition itself and the merits or demerits of the competition. Is it worth progressing in the Coppa Italia and adding the extra games to your schedule if you're in a top four race, if you're in a European Cup as well? It's definitely a talking point that comes up year after year.
Well, first of all, we have to see what starting 11 Bologna will pick, because yes, Lazio will make some rotation, but I think Bologna will do too, right? I mean, Lazio could be looking to fight for winning the Coppa Italia. I don't think Bologna has a chance. So, as you were mentioning, there's just a couple of matches more for Bologna. So I think they would be pretty happy to go out immediately. Talking about Lazio, I think Sarri would love to win a cup, and Coppa Italia is probably the easiest one. And maybe rotate a little bit more the players, give more time to a couple of subs like Marcos Antonio and so on. And then it depends. I mean, the problem with this competition, well, Coppa Italia has a lot of problems, many. But one of the other one is that you play now and then the next match is going to be in 2 months' time. Everything can change, you know. So that's a huge problem
Yeah.
because the team you're playing today is not the same you're gonna have in 2 months' time. Maybe Chido's back, maybe other players are injured, and so on. Or maybe in April, Isai is gonna have 3 weeks of unbelievable performance, and he's gonna play and score. So anything can happen. So that's make this competition weird.
Yeah. It's a stupid format to the
Yeah,
competition. I think you've hit the nail on the head with the point about Bologna, and that's, to be honest, fundamentally what's wrong with the Coppa Italia. Because for me, what domestic cups should be all about, and what the best ones are about, is the kind of the underdog stories, the unlikely wins, the exciting cup runs that smaller teams go on, or if you support a big team, seeing your team playing in some smaller, interesting stadiums. None of that happens in the Coppa Italia because the odds are so stacked against
yeah,
smaller teams. And this is the thing, in the grand scheme of things, with all the teams that enter the Coppa Italia, Bologna aren't even a small team. They're like a mid-table Serie A team, but still, like you say, they have so little chance of getting anywhere because they're going to get away draws all the way through. If they happen to make it as far as the semi-finals, they've made sure that that'll be over 2 legs. So whichever big team gets the small team will go through. I mean, it's
yeah.
so dull and kind of pathetically pandering to the biggest teams in the country. And there's nothing interesting about it because yeah, I mean, once it gets to the final, it's an exciting occasion, a big occasion to win silverware. But the actual the getting there, the journey to get there, is means very little to any of the teams who end up winning it. And I just don't understand this thing about giving the big teams home games all the time. It's so stupid. I remember going to Lazio Cremonese a few years ago, and there was like 3,000 people there. I was like, if that was in Cremona when this was back before they were promoted, obviously, they'd pack it out. It'd be a big occasion. Put it on a Friday night, small stadium. I just
Yep.
think that I don't understand why it is the way it is.
And the other thing is, why is it limited only to Serie A, Serie B, and top Lega Pro teams? It should be open to every professional club. So that's a huge miss for the Coppa Italia. But I think it can be a big chance for Lazio. Again, I would change things and put like who wins the cup goes to the Champions League instead of the Europe League. But that's another discussion. But yeah, I think it's a huge chance to try Maximiliano, who hadn't played, just played one friendly match this winter, and that's it. Marcos Antonio, because we need to know what's going on there. Because I was surprised to see Vecino coming in that position. Basic didn't play after a not great performance he had last match. So there are some players that we have question marks. I want to see improvement from Cancellieri. What's Luca Romero at? So it could be very useful as a match for Lazio, right?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it's always hard to know how much you take from these games. I think that's somewhere where actually playing a decent team like Bologna, perhaps you can take a bit more from it because when you do end up playing a Serie B team, it's too easy to rotate the team, and then when you get the win, just say, yeah, but it was a Serie B team. So I think there are merits to take from a performance in this game on Thursday. Um, and yeah, thankfully, like you said, with the Milan game not coming until a week tomorrow, next Tuesday, then at least there's time to rotate and it's not kind of clogging up the fixture list too much. But yeah, I mean, I hope there's a decent crowd. It'd be nice to see a decent crowd for a midweek game, but this is traditionally the hardest game of the calendar, apart from the kind of European group games, to get a decent crowd in for. So we'll see. Although you were just telling me there's been sold out a lot of the northern part of the stadium anyway.
Well, the problem is it's a 6 o'clock kickoff, which doesn't help. Thursday, 6 o'clock in Rome. It's not a great news. But this match is part of the season tickets. So if you have the season tickets, then you don't need to buy a ticket. You can go with your season ticket and get in. So this means that Curva Nord, Distinti Nord are sold out. But who's going to turn up to these matches? That's the question mark, because I don't know if all the owners of the season ticket will show up on Thursday.
Yeah, I hadn't actually realized it was 6 o'clock. Although better than Atalanta have to play at 3. I mean,
Again,
it just tells you everything you need to know about how seriously they take the organization of this tournament when they're putting a game on at Thursday at 3 o'clock.
yeah,
And it's not Epiphany. This isn't a national holiday. This is just a random Thursday.
yeah. I mean, this tells this is another problem of the Coppa Italia. I mean, don't play it at 3 o'clock. I mean, it's better if you put it at the same time of Lazio's match, right? I mean, it's simply nuts. I mean, it doesn't make sense at all. And don't broadcast it. I mean, if the problem is that, I mean, it's silly. It really shows you that they don't care. I don't know. At 3 o'clock, who's going to watch the match? Kids after school, right? And I don't think they're going to turn on. Oh, Atalanta's playing against, So yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Anything else? Is that for today?
I was hoping you bring out stats to finish up. Do you have it?
Not prepared anything this week, as
Well,
you can probably tell from the last half an hour.
Well, this is the first time since 2015 that Felipe Anderson scored in 2 consecutive matches in Serie A.
All right, that's a good one.
Yep. So that's encouraging sign.
There's the Vice Immobile.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I will finish with this question, Alistair. Do you think the relationship between Sarri and Tare is worse than ours?
God, I hope not. Imagine the tension. I mean, this podcast is held together by kind of sellotape and magic dust. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, if that's worse.
They don't meet very often at Formello, I guess. Anyway, thanks guys for listening. We'll be back after I think the Serie A match more than the Coppa Italia, but we can work it out. We can see what happened. Again, thanks for listening. Rate and subscribe to our podcast. Rate and review on iTunes. We are on Spreaker, Spotify, wherever you listen to our podcast. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We hit the 600 subscribers, so I mean, we want to increase if possible. Thanks again, Alistair. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.